My name is Catherine, and I'm a sophomore at Governor Livingston High School. I'm going to be honest, I'm a little out of my comfort zone right now, but I think it's important for me to be here to share a little bit about the Asian American and Pacific Islander student experience. Firstly, I want to preface this by saying that my own experiences may not and will not paint the full picture. Each person has their own story and their own experiences, and they are different from mine. With that being said, I'm sure it wasn't just me that grew up trying to hide my own culture from the other students around me. There would always be subtle comments from others about how foods like chicken feet or stinky tofu were weird and gross, and that was enough to convince me that Asian culture was different, and not necessarily in a good way. At school, I never acknowledged Asian holidays, didn't like bringing Asian food to school, and I never dressed in Asian clothing. I didn't want other students to see me as more Asian than I already appeared to be, so I tried to block out every aspect of my Chinese heritage when I was at school. Not because I disliked the food or the clothing or the holidays, but because I was scared of being judged for it. Now, as I got older, I began reading more stories about Chinese culture, learning about Asian Americans in history, and even cooking many of the foods that I'd once been too scared to bring to school. Little by little, as I learned more about my heritage, I grew more comfortable in my own skin. Looking back, I now realize that most of my peers weren't against Asian culture, they were just unacquainted with it, as I had been. Their comments about the food, fashion, and traditions often stemmed from their lack of understanding of the culture itself. When they squinted their eyes shut and said, "Hey look, I'm Chinese," it may not have been a complete insult. Rather, it was more of an indication that they did not understand the idea of someone being or looking different. Through all of this, they had inadvertently scared me into shying away from my own heritage. Now, I'm not saying that my classmates' words and actions were justified in any way, but I also don't think that me standing here and pointing fingers at others is going to properly address the root cause of this issue. While we're gathered here to mourn all of the Asian American and Pacific Islander lives lost, we're also here to advocate for the end to hate and violence directed at Asian Americans. Yes, there's only been a recent spike in hate crimes against the AAPI community, and yes, they are a response to frustration caused by the coronavirus pandemic. But think about it. These crimes are only an escalation of the racial discrimination and misunderstandings that were already present in our communities for such a long time. Those once harmless and funny comments about the AAPI community have now surged into brutal attacks. The only way we can put an end to this is to take the time to learn about other cultures and grow to be more accepting of those that are different. As humans, it is our first instinct to reject anything that doesn't follow our traditional idea of what is normal. By rejecting other cultures, we create the perfect breeding ground for hate. So, to all the student allies of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, I encourage you to branch out from your own culture and learn a little more about Asian holidays and traditions. I encourage you to try and understand some of the struggles that we endure, and I encourage you to speak out and act out to create a more welcoming environment for Asian Americans, both in and out of school. And most importantly, I hope you will take the time to consider how your words and actions can always impact those around you. And to all the Asian American and Pacific Islander students out here, I want you to know that you're not alone. I also encourage you to take the time to learn a little about your own culture, its history, and its significance in your life. Don't be afraid of being too Asian in your community. My hope for you all is that you will, just as I did, grow more comfortable in your own skin. There is a long way to go before we can fully transform this community into a welcoming and accepting environment, but I assure you all that it isn't impossible. Already at GL, our Understanding Asian Cultures Club has gained popularity among students and teachers, and we are continuously looking to educate others and ourselves about Asian culture. And finally, just take a look around. The sheer number of you here today, standing and rallying for justice, tells me that there is hope for the future. Thank you.